Hi, I'm Rob Renfroe, President of Good News, and this is Tom Lambrecht, our Vice President and General Manager. It's been a few weeks since we last spoke to you by video, and a lot has happened since then. And Tom, you've been right in the middle of it. These are important, difficult times for the church, don't you think?
They really are, Rob. We're facing a situation where we need to determine who we are as a church and what we stand for, and if we can even stay together.
I know it's hard to hear that, but I think that's exactly where we are. Well, you have been a busy guy recently. You've traveled to the Council of Bishops meeting to be a part of that, and then also to Eastern Pennsylvania. I want people to hear about both of those events. First, the Council of Bishops meeting. That was especially important because we were hoping that they were going to address what Bishop Talbert had done by celebrating what he called a holy wedding ceremony for two gay men in Alabama. You were right there. Tell us what it was like, and then tell us a little bit about what the council decided and what you thought about that.
The Council of Bishops decided that they were going to ask two of their members to file complaints against Bishop Talbert for undermining the ministry of another pastor, namely going into northern Alabama against Bishop Wallace Paget's request, and then also obviously performing the same-sex union service. So
the two bishops they asked to file on their behalf was Bishop Wallace Paget, and then also the president of the council.
Yes.
That's significant, don't you think?
Well, Bishop Venner is the president, as you said, and by her filing a complaint, she's really acting on behalf of the whole council.
That's how I understood it. I think some people who've contacted me maybe weren't pleased with this, but I think this is a very strong statement. It says the will of the council is that charges be filed against Bishop Talbert. It's a very strong message that what he did broke our covenant and that it simply is unacceptable.
That's how I read it as well, Rob. The Council of Bishops is not able to file a complaint as a group, so they had to designate somebody as individuals to do so.
Good. Well, I'd like to take a minute and thank those of you who watched the previous video and contacted your bishop. Over 5,000 of you saw that video, and I received many copies of emails and letters that were sent to various bishops. You had a part in helping us get a good result, and I want to thank you for that. Now, most recently, you've been in Eastern Pennsylvania. Reverend Frank Schaefer had charges filed against him for marrying a gay couple. One of them happened to be his son. You served as assistant counsel for the church. It's a role that you know well because you've represented the church's position before in Wisconsin. So tell us a little bit about what happened there and about the verdict and how you thought about that.
Well, it was obviously a very tense and emotional time for the people who were present. And I would say that the good news is that the defense, Reverend Schaefer, was not allowed to argue that other parts of the discipline trump the prohibition against same-sex marriages. The presiding bishop was very clear that you can't use part of the discipline to undermine other parts of the discipline. And I think that's consistent with judicial council rulings as well. The guilty verdict was very strong, and the penalty also was very strong. It requires Reverend Schaefer to be suspended for 30 days and to, during that time, discern whether he, in the future, can remain faithful to the United Methodist polity and discipline, or whether he is going to continue his advocacy by performing same-sex unions in the future.
Again, I've had some people say, well, it's a 30-day suspension, that's not much, but it's more than that, isn't it?
Well, if at the end of the 30 days, he has to report to the Board of Ordained Ministry of his annual conference whether or not he can submit himself to upholding the discipline in its entirety.
In other words, committing not to conduct any more same-sex marriages.
That's correct.
And really, he's already said that he's not willing to make that commitment, correct?
That's right. He said so on the witness stand, and he said so in comments subsequent to that.
So in essence, the verdict said, unless you change your mind you're going to have to turn in your orders and no longer be a United Methodist pastor.
That's correct.
So it's a strong verdict. The trials, frankly, regardless of what side you're on, are just distasteful. The fact that the church is putting some pastor on trial, especially in this case when it's for marrying his son, it just does not leave a good feeling for anyone. Why do you think it's necessary that we push ahead and bring these matters to a point of decision? Why are trials something that we have to do?
Well, I would say, Rob, that trials are absolutely a last resort. Always before you get to a trial, there is an attempt to reach a resolution that allows people to uphold the discipline and maintain accountability without having to go through the trial process.
So was Reverend Schaefer given some options before it got to a trial?
Yes, Reverend Schaefer had the opportunity to acknowledge that what he did was contrary to the discipline and commit to not doing it again. And if he had done that, there would not have been a trial.
So this whole thing could have been avoided if he had simply said, I married my son. It was a special case. I know I broke the covenant that we agreed to live by, but he was my son, and I promised not to do this again. There would have been no need for a trial.
That's correct.
This seems far from the narrative that evangelicals are out persecuting people, that we can't find big enough stones to throw at offenders. It seems like those that represented the church's position were actually very gracious and wanted to give him a way out.
I think that's definitely true, and you see that even in the penalty itself, which gives Reverend Schaefer 30 days to consider his future and did not, remove him from ordination immediately.
I think some of our viewers may not know that there are other violations that have been reported and that there are other trials that may be upcoming. You are an expert on this. It's one reason I value your being on our staff. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect to see in the future.
Well, there are a number of situations where pastors have had complaints filed against them, and those complaints are moving through the process of attempting to find a just resolution short of a trial. Most of them have completed that process and have not been able to be resolved. And so they are being turned over to ordained clergy from within their annual conferences, who then act as a prosecuting attorney, if you will, to do the investigation and come to the point of deciding whether to go through with a trial. And so we expect that to take place in several annual conferences over the next 6 months.
There are 4 or 5 cases that are out there, is that right?
There are a couple of cases in New York annual conference, Upper New York annual conference, and the Pacific Northwest has a couple of cases as well. In addition to the 36 pastors that recently performed a public service in Philadelphia in support of Reverend Schaefer.
We have a commitment to what we call holy conferencing. We get together, we seek God, we try to hear His voice. We try to hear His voice by listening to each other. That's the way that we come to decisions about who we're going to be as United Methodist. And actually, I think most of us believe that's a good process. We've been discussing this issue, holy conferencing, for well over 40 years now. We've consistently come down that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with God's teaching, while at the same time affirming the worth of everyone and believing the church should be gracious and reach out to all, regardless of what kinds of practices they may be engaged in. So we're at a place where we have said that we're going to live by the process of holy conferencing, and now we have hundreds of United Methodist pastors who say they're through with that. They know God's will. They know better than the general church. They know better than what the church has taught for the past 2,000 years. And so they are, in all likelihood, going to continue in one form or fashion to try to change us through what in another context would be called civil disobedience, and to find out if the United Methodist Church has the will and the resources to enforce the covenant that holds us together. I think, as Tom has said, the good news is our Council of Bishops has acted strongly to enforce that covenant. The decision in Eastern Pennsylvania also made it clear. Please continue to pray for the United Methodist Church. Please continue to be faithful where you are. Please continue to remain open to good news, that we might contact you with what's going on and let you know, so that you can be faithful where you are. We appreciate you. This is a time for all of us to pull together. And it's our job at Good News to lead United Methodist forward to a faithful future. Thank you.
Good News, for over 45 years, has been an independent organization, nonprofit within the United Methodist Church that's not funded by apportionment dollars, but by the generous gifts of so many donors over the years who have helped us out. We'd like you to stay connected to what it is that we're doing and stay informed in terms of what's going on in our church. You can do that by clicking at the link below this video, and it will take you to our website where you can sign up for our e-newsletter that goes out every couple of weeks and contains up-to-date information, as well as get on the list to receive our bi-monthly magazine and support Good News in a variety of different ways.